I'm a friend of Marvin, and he asked me to speak tonight because of my background in publishing, editing, writing, proofreading, and related tasks, to give a little idea of what the process of getting to a publication of a book is like. I often, at gatherings like this, people find out I'm an editor and they go, oh, I have an idea for a book. And the interesting thing is, there are lots of people who have ideas for books that very few people get from the idea to the actual book. And part of that, I mean, there are all kinds of reasons, but I think the main reason is that writing is very, very hard work. And a lot of people think a writer sits down, the words flow. That is not, at least for most writers, that is not how the process goes at all. It's especially hard for people like Marvin, who have full-time jobs, a spouse, friends, and lots of other responsibilities. And yet he is really one of the majority of writers that way. Only about 6% of writers can make a living by writing. And we hear about all the blockbuster writers and so on, but they really are the minority. Most writers, about 94% of them, are people who work and then they write on top of their work and everything else they have to do in their lives. So simply getting a book written is a big, big accomplishment. Yep. Yay! That happens also because of people who give writers support. The people who are gathered here tonight, family, friends, co-workers, and spouses. Eric deserves applause. All the time Marvin disappeared at night, on the weekends, and so you may need to reintroduce some because they may not even recognize it. So, but how does... No, I didn't. Okay. Damn it. So how does this, you can imagine this. This is a blank computer screen. How does this turn into this? And this is where every writer starts, with a blank screen or a blank sheet of paper, whatever era you're in, and it takes a lot to get to the point of the finished book. I'd like to read a quote from one of my favorite books on creativity called Free Play by Stephen Nachmanovich. It's Improvisation in Life and Art. And he says the prerequisites of creation are playfulness, love, concentration, practice, skill, using the power of limits, using the power of mistakes, risk, surrender, patience, courage, and trust. And I would add one more to Nachmanovich's list, and that is vulnerability. Because any person who creates is constantly being vulnerable to potential audiences, to their creation. That is always with you in the process. And the idea is wonderful, but to get it to the finished product, you have to go through a lot of mess. Chaos is where you spend a lot of your time trying to find your way. You think it's clear, and then you'll run into a barrier, and you keep working and working. So in spite of the vulnerability and the barriers, you keep going. And that's why so few people really complete writing books. They run into those barriers, and they can't keep going. So we celebrate the fact that Marvin kept going. And writing is not just writing. Actually, writing is really more rewriting and rewriting and rewriting and rewriting and editing. And then you get to the end of the book, and you look back and you go, oh. And you start again, rewriting, restructuring, whatever. And that's the process of creation. Once you find a publisher, you may find that there's not a good fit. They may want to do things to your book that just are not right for the book. So then you have to decide, well, you know, do I want to go with this publisher who says they're really going to publish my book, or do I want to go out and start looking again, publisher after publisher, rejection after rejection or rejection, in order to find a really good fit. Rejection is a very big part of writing, especially when you're trying to go for publication. Some of you may have heard that J.K. Rowling, who wrote the Harry Potter series, submitted her Harry Potter book to, I think it was like 8 or 9 publishers. Turned down by all of them until the last one. And you can bet that the earlier ones are now eating them. And then once you find your publisher, then sign the contract, and then you start the process of the editing. And I like to try to reassure my clients when I'm going to start attacking their baby, that I'm really going to try to make it the best that it can possibly be. Often in publishing house, you'll have someone in-house, I don't quite remember what the process was for you, Margaret, who will be a developmental editor, who will be working on crafting the book if there are structural issues, organizational issues, characterization issues, that hopefully gets all worked out in-house. Then the next step is called copy editing. And copy editors do a wide range of things, from harassing authors on little details like N dash versus M dash.
You guys don't know that right.
And the editor, the copy editor, should be getting that right. We look for things like structural problems, inconsistencies in the story, inconsistencies in treatment of a word or a person, a character's name. Maybe in chapter 3 the person is called John, and then later they're called Jamie, but there's no explanation of why that person becomes Jamie later. Or problems with the storyline. John in chapter 3 says he's going to go and get that arson. Well, there hasn't been fire. The fire doesn't occur until chapter 7. And so you have to work with the author to get that in the right flow chronologically. That happens not because authors aren't paying attention, but because they are so close to their work. They have been working on it so long and so closely, they often can't see what's in front of them. I don't know if some of you may be old enough that you took a typing class and had to give your paper to your neighbor to proofread it, because your neighbor would see things that you didn't see. And that's one thing that an editor does, is try to see things that the author is too close to see and help bring the book to its best self. And then, of course, once you finally get through copy editing, then it goes to typesetting, and then the final round is proofreading. And usually the author gets a set of proofs, the proofreader reads through, tries to get all the last cleanup, typos that may have occurred in the typesetting process, missing punctuation, disagreements of one sort or another. And then the book goes and is printed or prepared electronically. In Marvin's case, both print and electronic. And you have publicity. You have to somehow get your book out there. Most publishers do not have very large publicity budgets. I mean, they seem large when you're an author, but and they will put the majority of their money behind their big names, because that's where they get their money. And a statistic was given to me at one point that publishers, I don't know if this is still true, it may be even worse now, but at one point, publishers, about a third of their books would lose money, about a third of their books would break even, and a third would make money. It's a pretty tough business to be in.